Hi, everyone. Welcome to the third part of our series in our Dementia 101. Today, we will cover the topic of navigating challenging behaviors. We will get started shortly. As a courtesy, we're going to give everyone just a little time to log on and to get situated. A couple of orders of business. It would be best if you kept your questions into the Q&A feature rather than the chat feature, just so we can organize ourselves. At the end of the presentation, Joyce will get to as many questions as possible. If it's anything like the last couple of webinars, there are typically an overwhelming amount of questions, and Joyce will leave time at the end of the webinar to get to as many as we can. So once again, please use the Q&A feature, and we will get started shortly. Welcome back, everyone. I know many of you have been with us for the whole series, and I wanted to present to you again, for those of you that have not, Joyce Mahoney is the Vice President of Memory Care and Programming for Belmont Village Senior Living. She has dedicated over 20 years of research and application to therapeutic recreation, psychiatric rehabilitation, behavior management, and dementia education and training. Joyce will share with us today her expertise in navigating challenging behaviors. This will be an invaluable resource to help us understand how to engage with our loved ones afflicted by this illness. This is the third part in our Dementia 101 series, and I invite you to visit belmontvillage.com webinars to gain access to Joyce's previous presentations, as well as to a number of presentations we've hosted with world-leading experts in a library of topics. For over 25 years, Belmont Village has remained committed to being on the forefront of successful aging and changing the paradigm of senior living. We thank you for joining us today. And Joyce, as usual, it is such a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, Jackie, thank you so much for a wonderful introduction and being our moderator today again for our third session. So hopefully today's session, everyone who is participating will find this interesting and informative and helpful, especially if you know someone personally who has a diagnosis of dementia and you may be faced with some of the typical challenges that may occur in the disease process. So let's go ahead and get started, okay? Today, we are going to talk about possible challenges in regards to possible behaviors that may occur based on symptoms from the diagnoses. So when we talk about dementia and dementia-related behaviors, I find it very important to really define and really identify what a behavior is. So for those of you who are already knowledgeable and have some experience, this will be a little review for you, but let's kind of get down to some of the basics in regards to this. So by definition, a behavior are the actions or reactions of a person or things in response to things that happened around us. So we're basically reacting to whatever is happening in our immediate environment. Now, and that could be a wide spectrum of things, of course. Now, all behavior has meaning, okay? Any kind of behavior, whether it's a positive behavior or a negative behavior, all behavior has meaning. And this pertains to all of us, whether you have dementia or not. A human being does not behave in a certain manner for no reason at all. It just doesn't happen that way, okay? So all behavior has meaning. Now, behavior is also, in the world of dementia, behavior represents a level of communication. In our previous session, we talked about communication and trying to understand what the person is trying to communicate. So again, it's all interconnected. So behavior is a means of communicating feelings and needs. And in many cases, it could be communicating an unmet need. So the person may not be able to express verbally what the need or the feeling is coming out in some level of behavior, in a form of behavior, okay? Now, behaviors can also express the resident's abilities to demonstrate disabilities or challenges. I can't do something the way I used to, So now I'm behaving in a manner because I can't accomplish a task or do something the way I used to be able to do it. And so it just comes out and being expressed in a different way. So when a person loses the ability to communicate verbally, behaviors take on a greater and more impactful meaning. And I can't say that enough. When we lose our words and we can no longer articulate our needs or what we want, behaviors take on a whole new meaning. So again, kind of emphasize that piece, kind of write that down if you're taking notes. Now, behaviors, when we talk about behaviors, we also talk about behaviors and underlying causes of the behaviors, which are the symptoms. So behaviors are symptoms of an underlying issue. So a behavior has more depth into its meaning than just what you're seeing on the surface. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay. Now, let's talk about, as I mentioned, we talked about the symptom versus the behavior and how that's related, but let's talk about the symptom versus the actual problem. Okay. Now, the symptom, okay, is a behavior that indicates there is an unmet need or feeling, usually of maybe embarrassment, loss of control of your life, or even sometimes when someone's embarrassed or humiliated because they cannot function the way they used to. Okay. Now, the problem, so it's very important that we distinguish between the two. The problem is the underlying issue that is being expressed as the symptom. Okay. Now, our mission always, when you're interacting either with someone at Belmont, as our staff does on a daily basis, or if you have a loved one that's at home with you and you're caring for them, the mission is really to help address and alleviate the underlying problem that's causing the behavior. Now, when we talk about behaviors, a lot of times we refer to behaviors more in a negative sense because it might be in the form of frustration, anxiety, agitation, nervousness, things like that. Okay. But not to forget, there's a lot of behaviors that are more euphoric. They're joyful and they're happy behaviors as well. So I don't want to dismiss that either. Okay. But it is our mission, and it's always important to address the underlying problem. Only then will the symptom disappear or dissipate or be reduced in its intensity and frequency if we address the problem. So we have to kind of be a little detective and get underneath and behind the behavior and what's causing the behavior. That's the problem. Okay. You got to figure that one out. Okay. So let's talk further about the behaviors when the behavior does become a problem. It becomes an issue and we can't figure it out. Okay. So we're going to start step by step. So I want to take you through a process when you're addressing a behavior and you can kind of say to yourself, it's like, oh my gosh, my spouse or my partner or my family member, they've never behaved this way. They've never demonstrated this behavior before. But I'm going to take you step by step so you can go through a process on trying to figure this out and hopefully come up with a solution. Okay. All right. So bear with me, be patient. We're going to go through all of this. Okay. So let's go through a couple other definitions. All right. When we talk about behaviors, there's different types of behaviors. And I chose 3. Normal behavior. Okay. We need to distinguish what is normal. Okay, for the individual. So a normal behavior is a behavior that's very typical for that person or for the person in whatever dementia stage they are in at the time. Okay. Now, normal behavior is not a threat or harmful to themselves or to anyone else or anything. And typically the behavior can be addressed quite easily just through, strategies of routine and structure as interventions. Okay. So normal is pretty normal for that person. Okay. Now, challenging behaviors, okay, by definition, is a behavior that requires more time and effort to address. Okay. And it takes more time and effort than a typical routine intervention that we mentioned that would be considered normal. Okay, but because it's challenging, depending on the situation, it will require, and typically does require, immediate attention. So again, if someone is escalated in their behavior and they're agitated, I mean, we don't want them to stay in that state. And so we want to figure out a way to de-escalate the behavior, to bring it down or minimize it little by little until it dissipates. Okay. Now, the challenging behavior, yes, it's exactly that. It is challenging, but it's not necessarily what we refer to is as being a problem, because the behavior is not harmful. Okay. And typically a challenging behavior, if someone is frustrated or nervous or anxious about something, the challenge, that type of challenging behavior can be easily distracted or diverted by something else. Okay. And so you divert the attention and it takes the attention off the anxiety, nervousness, agitation, and we put the focus on something else, therefore decreasing that behavior. Okay. Now, the third is what we call a hazardous behavior. And just by the word alone, you can probably figure out what that means. So obviously it is going to be a behavior that needs immediate attention and does not, behavior typically does not respond to just kind of a typical, oh, what can I do for you? Oh, come over here and here's a little diversion. No, this type of behavior escalates to the point where it might make you a little nervous because you're not sure what the next step is and what the person might do. Can it be harmful? Can it be dangerous? Can the person grab something and throw it, or might they strike at somebody or something? And so the hazardous type behaviors need to be addressed immediately and doing our best to de-escalate that. Okay. Okay. So let's go through a little example, and I have several examples of different types of behaviors that we're going to address today. But when we're talking about the symptom versus the problem, I'm going to take you through a little example of showering. And I use the example of showering because typically in more moderate, low, moderate, later stages of dementia, this might become a bit of a challenging behavior because there might be resistance to showering, resistance to some level of care, dressing, grooming, those types of things. But it's also a necessity. You see, I mean, hygiene is not an option. So a lot of times when I have our staff or I have family members come to me and say, mother or father, they won't shower. Okay. They won't let me bathe them, or they won't change their clothes, things like that. Okay. So anyway, so I use that as the example. Okay. Now, the question is that the behavior itself, there's a few questions that I have posted here. Is the behavior a challenge for the loved one? Okay. The person with dementia. Or is the behavior a challenge for the family? Is it a challenge for the caregiver? Who is it posing a challenge to? Or is it all of the above? Okay. So who is the person who has the problem, has the challenge? Okay. Now let's go through the symptom and the problem. Okay. It's really identifying the symptom and the problem. So the expectation is that a person needs to shower, right? Just like everybody. And if you live in community living, or even if you live at home, typically you're going to take maybe, 2-3 showers on average per week. And that is considered the expectation, okay, for good hygiene. Now, the caregiver or family member, if that is the expectation, now the caregiver may feel pressure to comply with the showering schedule to make sure that they meet that expectation and they don't fall short of that, okay? Now, to comply, the caregiver uses an approach that may be too rushed and can be misunderstood by the person with dementia. Hence, here comes the problem, okay? So it's the person with dementia that doesn't have the problem. It would be me as the caregiver has the problem, because now I'm kind of pushing the expectation on the person with dementia because I need to fulfill that expectation, okay? All right, I hope this is making sense, okay? So then the next step, what happens is that a behavior occurs because a resident feels pressured or even embarrassed, okay, or even really more so, I will say this, even more so, a feeling of a loss of control over the situation or over their own self, okay? And then then the resident resists and becomes combative or trying to regain control. They don't understand what they're doing, okay? And now I'm agitated, I'm frustrated, what are you doing? Now the symptom is the behavior, but the underlying problem is that we're trying to enforce an expectation on someone who doesn't understand what the expectation is. So again, let me recap with all of this because that was a mouthful, that was a lot. So again, it's trying to differentiate between where is the true problem that causes the symptomatic behavior, okay? So the pressure and the expectation put pressure on the person, the demented person, and then the symptom occurs as the agitated behavior, okay? So again, I know I've been doing this for many years, so kind of easy for me to understand, but again, kind of replay that process in your mind. So if you're ever posed with someone who's demonstrating some behaviors, you need to stop and pause and think, wait a minute, the behavior, what caused the behavior? What is the underlying problem that made this happen in the first place? What made them agitated? What made them more confused? What made them anxious or nervous? That's the true question. We have the tendency to right away want to just de-escalate the problem de-escalate the behavior without understanding or figuring out what the underlying problem was that caused it in the first place. Now, this is a lot of what I've already said. So identifying the symptom of the behavior, determining the root cause of the behavior. So again, it's going to call for you to do a little more in-depth thinking and problem solving to get to the underlying issue. Now, once you do get good at practicing this process, the hope is that you're going to see less of the exhibited behavior, less frequency, and even less intensity. Okay. So what you're going to turn into a detective and you're going to look for the following points. Okay. Now, these are some of the most common things that I came up with that in my experience. You're going to ask yourself, is the person overwhelmed by any activity or task? So anything that's trying to be done, any interaction or anything that they might be trying to do on their own. Is there a feeling of being overwhelmed or overstimulated? That's question one, okay? Is the person possibly experiencing any physical discomfort or even pain? Okay, because pain will actually come out in more of a negative type behavior. Because again, if I can't express my pain and saying, oh, my arm hurts or my hip hurts, my back hurts, now I'm just going to be more agitated and frustrated because that's how I'm expressing my discomfort and pain. Is the person frightened or even suspicious? Sometimes suspicion or paranoia can be a symptom of dementia, but is there fear that comes into play in any situation? Are they fatigued? Being tired, not enough sleep, not sleeping through the night because sometimes the sleep patterns might change. Days and nights get mixed up and now they're not sleeping very well. So now because I'm fatigued and I know I'm this way, if I'm too tired and I haven't gotten enough sleep, I can become a little bit more irritable, okay, because I'm sleep deprived. Are they hungry? Okay. We do experience appetite changes, again, decreased appetite or not eating enough or sometimes eating too much. Am I hungry? Do I have a feeling of cessation that I feel comfortable? Or am I hungry and I'm not eating enough, but I don't have the verbal ability to ask for more food and say, I'm hungry? Okay. Do they need to use the restroom? Again, this is another symptom that the person may not feel the sensation that I need to go to the bathroom, or if they do, they don't realize the process of taking themselves to the restroom and doing what they need to do to relieve themselves. So do they need to use the restroom? And maybe we need to set a schedule for periodic restroom visits. Okay. And do they think you are someone who is trying to harm them? Okay. So during the interactions, move slow, but speak very clearly and distinctly, and letting them know step by step, okay, in the least amount of words as possible, what you are trying to do during every interaction. So if it is taking that shower, before you do anything, you let them know what you're going to do before you actually do it. Okay. Now, here's some interventions when behaviors do occur. Okay. Now, you want to assure high quality care for the person with dementia with an understanding of prevalence and risk factors. Now, investigating interventions that have potential to protect residents from consequences of possible harm. You want to make sure that we maintain a person-centered approach for each residence, identifying, or each person, resident if you live with us, a person-centered approach, identifying the very individualized needs for that person, because we know one size never fits all. None of us are alike. We may have similarities, but again, the approach that you take with any single person needs to be tailor fit for that individual. Okay. You're going to tailor fit exercise programs, medication reviews. Again, every little tiny detail in their life now needs to be tailor fit and customized so it's adherent for success for that person. Okay. Now, also, you want to consider environmental modifications to the needs of that person. So, again, is it best that, okay, maybe if it's showering or if it's meal times, medications, sometimes you do have to take them at specific times of the day, morning, noon, or evening. Sometimes other daily routines can be modified and adjusted to fit the needs of that person. Maybe I'm a person who like to shower or do things in the morning, but now with my dementia, it's changed. And now maybe I prefer it in the afternoon or the evening. So we have to be able to identify what some of those adjustments are needing to be right now. And we are the ones who have to be flexible, because the person with the dementia is really no longer able to be as flexible as they used to because of their dementia. So we are the ones who have to adjust and be flexible to meet their needs. Okay. We also need to assess the person's abilities and individually tailor the creative strategies to address every single issue, however big or however small it might be. So really identifying the individual needs. What do they need? What are their abilities? What do they want? What time of day? It really does get down to those nitty-gritty details. Now, as I'm saying all of this, I don't want anyone to think, oh my gosh, this sounds so overwhelming. All right. What I want you to do is really take one step at a time. Take one little point, make a list of things that you might need to address, okay, and figure out. But you're going to start with one thing at a time, because it can be a little overwhelming for the caregiver or the family member. So tackle one thing at a time. If it's just getting some general routine, start with the general routine and structure through the day. And then you can little by little start fine tuning and detailing each day as it comes. I promise you it will fall into place. Okay. Now, some of the important points here, okay, when it does come to behaviors, okay, you are going to use what I call the detective's approach to finding the root cause of the behavior, okay? And we talked about the root cause already, but it's important to, when you are observing a behavior, and I am going to refer to, if it's a negative behavior, take a deep breath and pause for a moment. As long as it's not a dangerous behavior, pause for a moment and never jump to conclusions. Don't react to their behavior, okay? Because you need to stay calm and you need to stay level-headed, okay? Again, asking yourself the difference. Is this a symptom? Is this a problem? Why is this behavior occurring? What was the antecedent to the behavior that escalated or made the behavior? Okay. but you do want to act before the behavior escalates. So kind of jump in there, kind of assess the situation, move in slowly, and come up with your approach. But identify, ask yourself, where did this behavior come from? Okay, so let's talk about some specific behaviors. Okay, these are some of the questions, and I chose a few most common behaviors, and I wanted to elaborate on them. Now, repetition, okay, is one that I get asked about quite often. Okay, now when we talk about repetitive behavior, okay, it's not necessarily just verbal repetitions. It might be behavioral repetitions in regards to movements, gestures, different things like that. It could be sounds, it could be words, but basically repetition is repeating or doing something over and over and over again. And so it could be a word, a question, a gesture, an activity. But when continuous repetition of statements and information occur, it's more likely that the person with dementia is seeking comfort or affirmation, because it's just happening again and again and again. And so the individual just may not be satisfied with what is happening. Okay. So I want to categorize and address the behaviors in 3 phases here. Basically, the possible causes, the changes in the communication, and how to respond. See, we have the tendency to jump to how do we respond right away without figuring out the 2 previous segments here. So with repetition, some of the possible causes are going to be obviously deterioration of neuronal cells and changes in how the person actually sees the world, because the world is forever changing as the dementia progresses. And it also changes how they interact and behave in their new world, because the world just becomes a little overwhelming, and they just don't see it or interpret it in the same way as you and I do, because the brain is now impaired. Now, short-term memory loss, forgetfulness, confusion, anxiety, loss of language, changes in communication, all of these things are going to build up and kind of contribute to changes in behavior. Okay. Now, the changes in communication, the individual with dementia may find it difficult with finding the right words. Now, if you were in our previous sessions with communication, sometimes finding the right words, if they do have some verbal abilities, sometimes they can't get the right word or they use the wrong word. Okay. And it's kind of that word that's on the tip of your tongue. Okay. But it just never comes. To you and I, it will come, but to the person with a memory impairment, the words just don't come. Or in a conversation, they may lose their train of thought right in the middle of a conversation. They repeat familiar words because it is familiar, and they just repeat. And it's almost like a little fixation on the repetition of the similar words. Okay. Now, they also might describe things versus using their name or specific words for an object or a thing. Okay. So they might say, well, it's that thing that, and you write with it, but they never come up with the word pen or pencil. Okay. All right. Difficulty organizing thoughts, using words logically, using gestures, or even sounds more than words. It could revert to that. Okay. So now with repetition, the behavior of repetition, what you need to do is really focus on the emotion versus the behavior. Focus on the emotion versus the behavior. Now, again, when something is communicated or a behavior emerges, you're going to look at the body. You're going to listen to the sound of someone's voice, the intent in the voice, the inflection in the voice. It's going to express a level of emotion. Okay. You need to be in tune with the emotion. What are they trying to convey? Okay. Now, with the repetition, okay, you need to decipher the reason behind the repetition. No, I need this. I need it. 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 Well, you need what? Well, I need it. I need it. Okay, so that sometimes happens and it just repeats and repeats and repeats. And you're like, oh my gosh, they need what? Okay, allow extra time. And sometimes it might be a little guessing game. So you might throw some things out with the behavioral repetition. You might throw some answers out. Well, you need what? Do you need this, 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 this? And you kind of go down a list, kind of a little checklist, and maybe say, yes, yes, that's what I need. So you're going to look for a different response where it's not the repetition, and they might gesture or have a body movement that denotes, yes, that's it. And now you know you're on the right track. Okay. But allow extra time. Don't rush conversations. Don't expect them to come up with the right answer or, respond in your time. You're going to have to slow it down and work in their time. Okay. Be calm and patient. Now, I know that's easier said than done sometimes because you're looking for an answer and you want the answer now, but be calm and patient, and always remember not to argue, because the person, I assure you, is not doing this on purpose. They are not. Now, again, neurons are dying off in the brain. They cannot prevent this from happening. It's a symptom. They can't change it, but they don't know how to fix it. So we are going to step in and provide that mentoring support. Try not to correct. What you can correct nicely and say, well, is it this? I don't think it's this, but is it this? So if there's any kind of correction, it needs to be a helpful correction, not just a blanket correction and say, well, it's this, it's this. No, 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 no. Be patient, be calm, don't argue, don't overcorrect, but you want to help. And sometimes you have to provide and fill in the blank and fill the answer for them, okay? All right. Visual cues are always quite helpful. Sometimes photos, calendars, notes, sometimes drawings, anything, gestures pointing to something, if they're hungry, maybe they're pointing to the kitchen, or maybe they're pointing to their mouth or holding their belly area. That could be the same thing if they have to use the restroom. So you're going to have to kind of decipher between the two. But now it's very important that we need to accept the behavior. In regards to repetition, that may not stop for a while. It may, as the disease progresses, it may get less and less, but then the words become fewer also. But there are times where we just have to accept the behavior, and this is where they are in the disease process. Okay. Agitation. Okay. Anxiety and agitation. All right. Now, this one's a little bit more challenging. Now, anxiety and agitation is a troubled state of fear or anger. Okay. Mostly fear. I do want to stress fear, demonstrated by inappropriate verbal or physical actions. Okay. Maybe it can be caused by a number of different issues or circumstances that may worsen the person's ability to think and process information. And it is a profound loss of a person's ability to understand new information. They have a great difficulty processing new information and new stimuli within their immediate surroundings and their environment. This is a direct result of the dementing illness, a direct result. Again, no one gets agitated for no reason. No one gets anxious for no reason. This is a result of the disease. Okay. Now, possible causes that someone might get anxious, nervous, or agitated is that there may be a change in the environment. There might be a change in the environment. Okay. Did we move the furniture around? Do you have a new environment? Sometimes we take them out to dinner. I can't process the public space. It's too much stimulation for me. Okay. A hospitalization can cause anxiety, nervousness, and fear. Again, hospitalization for someone who has a diagnosis of dementia is considered more of a traumatic event, and they have a hard time adjusting to that situation. And also changes in routine. Routine and structure are very, very important. Change is difficult. Routine is better. Okay. Now, the person can also misperceive threats, someone who comes too close in their proximity. And if I don't know who you are, or the person doesn't know who you are, you might pose as a threat and then cause someone to get agitated. Okay. Fear and fatigue, trying to make sense of a confusing world. So here's, fear and fatigue. Okay. If I'm tired, you are more apt to be a little bit more irritable and a little bit more sensitive and easily agitated. Okay. If you are fatigued. So we always want to take a look and understand, are they sleeping well? Did they get enough sleep? Do they need naps during the day? Okay. Tips to prevent, again, creating a calm environment, not too much external stimuli. We have the tendency to think that sometimes music in the background always helps. Yes, music is great. I love music, but make sure it's not too loud and make sure it is the right type of music that is more of a preference for that individual. Okay. You want to simplify tasks and create structured routines. Provide rest periods throughout the day. Their whole level of endurance tends to wane a bit, and you might notice that more frequent rest periods are required at this point. Check their personal comfort level. Again, are they hungry? Do they need the bathroom? Are they thirsty? So again, these are all underlying issues that we need to address that could possibly cause the agitation. Now, on our end, always provide reassurance, because if someone is anxious or fearful, they need reassurance that they're safe. I need to know that I am safe. Am I in a safe place? Are you safe? Am I safe to be with you? So providing reassurance with reassuring words, staying calm, a calm tone, calming gestures, even opening your arms, again, holding your hand, knowing that that person needs to know that you're there for them. Okay. Use positive statements and positive body language. And make sure that, if we need to modify the environment, modify the environment. You can also engage in an alternate activity as a diversion to the behavior. Sometimes if we kind of change the focus or shift the focus to another task, then it might help provide that diversion and alleviate some of that anxiety or agitation. Okay. So the next one we have here is sundowning. Now, some of you may have heard of sundowning. Some of you have not. So by definition, the sundowning is demonstrated by a group of symptoms or dementia-related behaviors that may possibly occur more to mid to late afternoon and through the evening. Now, the timing and the prevalence of this will vary from person to person. And when we talk about any of the behaviors, including sundowning, not every single person experiences all of these behaviors. Everybody is different. Some might experience sundowning while others do not. Okay. Now, when someone sundowns, it may include increased confusion, some disorientation, higher levels of anxiety and nervousness. You might see the person maybe pacing or even more a little bit worried, as though I have to go somewhere or like they have to do something. Is that kind of a feeling like, uh-oh, where am I going? I don't belong here, but I have to do something. I'm supposed to be doing something, but I don't know what that is. So here's the pacing back and forth. So sundowning is a whole cluster of symptoms that are occurring at a specific time during the day. Okay. Now, possible causes of this may be mental and physical exhaustion. Again, check that sleep. Adjusting to a new environment. Okay. If you have moved, if you've been hospitalized, or even sometimes, even if you do move into community living, there's always an adjustment period. Okay. So acclimation and adjustment is expected. And so sometimes a person might exhibit and demonstrate some behaviors, but what we're going to look for is that once they get adjusted and acclimated to a new environment or a changed environment, that those behaviors will start minimizing. Okay. Possible causes also confusing the day and nighttime. Okay, so it could be 3 in the afternoon, but someone thinks it might be 7 in the morning, that kind of a thing. Stressful situations, hallucinations, it can cause this, and may cause dreams also may cause some disorientation as well. And even things that people might see on television can cause a little anxiety and nervousness as well, that can contribute to some sundowning. So you want to be kind of choosy on what people are watching on television. So kind of pick Dancing with the Stars or some feel good kind of TV shows. Okay. Now, encourage plenty of rest and ample sleep, maybe more frequent rest periods, as we said earlier. Schedule appointments. So if there's doctor's appointments or you do need to go to different places, whether it's visiting family or going to see physicians, you might want to consider making those earlier in the day, in the morning time, early afternoon, especially if you know your person exhibits sundowning. Okay. That routine, again, provide a daily routine, typical bedtime, wake times, sleep times, meal times, bathing times. Again, here's that routine that's really, really going to help. The routine also provides some sense of security, knowing that the resident, even though there's dementia, the resident can anticipate a routine. So even though there's dementia, even though you do a routine for a prolonged period of time, even though there's dementia and some forgetfulness, the routine becomes exactly that. It becomes very structured and routine, and they still have the ability to anticipate that structure. Okay, which is a good thing. Okay, spending time outdoors, reducing overstimulation. And again, you want to avoid the caffeine, especially later in the day, and minimize any alcohol. Now, approaches that you would take, again, is moving slowly and calmly. You got to remain calm in all these situations, and identify personal comfort needs, what's going to make them comfortable, what makes them happy, what provides some pleasure for that individual. And we're not going to argue. We're not going to resist. We're going to provide reassurance, making sure that they feel safe and secure. Okay. Allow the person to pace and move about freely within a safe environment. Again, if part of their routine and sundowning is pacing back and forth, kind of going up and down, back and forth, whether it's in the house or, in more of a community setting, make sure that it's obstacle free and that they can actually move about, okay, and kind of work off some of this anxiety during this time of day within a safe environment. Okay, now let's elaborate on that one a little bit more, the pacing and the wandering. Okay, it's common for persons with Alzheimer's disease to wander or pace repetitively and possibly even become lost. Okay, so safety, when this is happening, safety is always going to be the top priority. Okay, during the wandering or pacing, and let me define the difference between the two words. The pacing has a tendency to pace back and forth, back and forth. That's pacing. So kind of up and down the hallway, back and forth, up and down. Wandering is really kind of out aimlessly with no set direction. It's not just back and forth, it's kind of all over the place. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. All right. Now, when they're wandering or pacing, they may become unaware of where they are within that environment. So you may have to provide some redirection, which is fine, but gentle redirection kind of bring them back to a safe area if they're walking off somewhere. But the behavior of walking without a purpose can be risky and even sometimes dangerous if they're not in a safe place and they get lost. So if you're not in a community setting where the environment is set up to be safe for persons with dementia, you may have to reset your home environment to ensure their safety. Okay. Now, for the wandering and the pacing, typically, this can happen in late moderate stages of dementia. But typical causes are as the disease progresses, you're going to have higher levels of confusion and forgetfulness and even disorientation. Okay. Therefore, the person's not becoming familiar, they don't remain familiar with their environment. So things that used to be familiar, such as their home, now become unfamiliar to them. Okay, they don't recognize it anymore. So now I'm just kind of moving about, almost in search. It's kind of, really reminds me of, that they're searching for something familiar. It's not familiar anymore, but I'm looking for something familiar. So I'm moving until I find something. It kind of looks like that. Okay. Nervousness and anxiety in crowds. So again, environmental factors come into play very strongly. So if you're out in public places, if you're at doctor's offices, in a restaurant, or if you're shopping with the person, although those are wonderful things and great times to interact with your loved one, you need to have an awareness that that might cause more anxiety for the person because they can't manage or tolerate a lot of external stimuli and a lot of people, a lot of conversations, and a lot of noise in their immediate environment. So they might become restless, and adjusting to the change environment becomes very, very difficult. Okay. Now, the tips to prevent, you want to provide, again, I am going to say this is always my disclaimer in all of our sessions, is that I repeat, not because I have dementia myself, but I'm repeating for emphasis. And you're going to notice that there are a lot of similarities to the tips to prevent the behavior and how to respond to behavior. They might be very similar because you keep hearing me say structured day, routine day, stay calm, use tone of voice, positive body language, and gestures. It's just the intensity and the frequency in which you use these responses to the specific behavior that will change. Okay. But a lot of the responses can be quite similar. You just need to know how to kind of adjust yourself and regulate how you respond at what level. Okay. Engage in meaningful and purposeful activities. If you know your loved one really enjoyed something in the past, it's reminiscing and looking at all the family photos. Maybe it is that. Maybe they like to be read to. Maybe they used to read, but no longer read, that maybe you can read them a short story or read them poems. They might find that enjoyable. So again, kind of redirecting onto a purposeful activity that they would enjoy. Okay. Again, monitor for the fatigue. Here's that. I'm repeating myself. Okay. For emphasis. And then also redirecting the walking, making sure that it's obstacle free and it's a safe place for them to walk. All right. Assess the person's response to the new environment. So if there's any changes, be very, very aware. You're going to really hone in on how your loved one, how your person is responding to anyone, anything within the environment. And that includes sound. Okay. Sound and light. Provide a care companion. You can do that. So maybe sometimes one-on-one, you can have someone walk with the person to ensure that they're safe. Sometimes a resident or person may start walking very fast, or they start walking and they kind of lean over, hunched over as they walk. And so again, to ensure more safety and to prevent any fall risk, you might have someone yourself or someone walk with that person. Okay. All right. Now, how to respond, again, providing the safe environment. You also may want to look into providing an ID bracelet for them. So if for some reason, and hopefully not, but if they ever did get lost, if you were out in a public place, in a restaurant, in a store, and they walked off, maybe having an ID bracelet on them would help provide identification for someone who might see them wandering around and know that they might look confused, and they may step in and help. You can also create an ID with a recent photo and a short bio of your loved one in case they do get lost. Then you have it to share with family members and friends. Have you seen my person? Or if you need to call authorities to have a more in-depth search, then you have information to give them as well. Okay. Aggression and anger. Aggressive behaviors can either be verbal or physical, okay? And unfortunately, it can happen with no apparent reason. And it can be the result of a frustrating situation. Now, the hard part is trying to determine what that frustrating situation was for the person. Although this can be very difficult to handle or to manage, it's very helpful to understand that the person with the memory impairment is not behaving this way on purpose. Again, no person gets angry for no reason at all. No one becomes aggressive for no reason at all. Something is triggering the behavior. Okay. Now, some possible causes are maybe excessive frustration that they're not being heard because they are not having the ability to articulate their needs. And again, it just gets to the point where it just escalates, it builds and builds, and they become aggressive, verbal outbursts, whatever that might look like. Okay. Sometimes they're in physical pain and they can't express it. Many times they may be constipated. They have a difficult time using the bathroom. I know we've talked about using the restroom often, but sometimes they're not able to. And again, fatigue, hunger, and thirst. Okay. Now, again, I go back to having unfulfilled needs and wants, and understanding their routine. And when you build that routine and that structure, we have the tendency to build a routine and structure in their day that fit our needs, but our needs actually come second. And if we fulfill their needs first, ours will get filled as well. So it's very important to fulfill their needs and their wants within a given day first and foremost, because you're going to be doing things that are going to help prevent the behaviors from even occurring in the first place. Okay. So you want to always remember too, to get in front of it, to help set things up within that routine and structure to help prevent the behavior from happening at all. Okay. Now, you want to determine if the behavior is sudden or if it's reoccurring. So is it a new behavior or a recurring behavior? Okay. So you want to distinguish between the two. If it's recurring, then it's much easier to understand the reason behind the behavior. If it always reoccurs, maybe at the same time of day, maybe it's right before dinner because that's when they're starting to get hungry. Or if it's a brand new behavior, maybe someone never got angry before, but now they are. Okay, that's a new behavior. Or if they're wandering now and they never did, or it's a new behavior. Now, it could be because the disease is progressing a little bit. And so you are going to notice some changes in abilities and behaviors. So that will fluctuate. Okay. Again, making appointments earlier in the day, avoid long conversations. And when you do things, whether it's a conversation or if it's an interaction, making it very simple. Do not make things complicated. You want them as uncomplicated as possible. So as simple and as easy as possible so they're able to understand. Okay. Now, attempt to identify the immediate cause, because again, aggression and anger, okay, it can be dangerous. It can lead in and fall under that category of a hazardous behavior. But you do need to identify the immediate cause before it escalates any further. Okay. Consider the person's emotions. Okay. Are they managing the emotions? Is it just a more of an an outburst of emotion because it's just kind of built up? Let the emotion out and then see if it de-escalates at all. But you want to examine the emotions behind the words or actions. So if someone, for example, if someone is nonverbal, okay, it's going to be more in body language and fists and thrusts and frowns and more grunts, okay, those types of sounds. And then listen to the tone and the pitch, okay, of the sounds, or even maybe if it is words, okay. So listen to the emotions and the sounds. Rule out pain, okay, as any of the underlying causes. And try to the best of your ability, shift the focus with a diversion, with anything that can be considered an alternate activity. Whether it's trying to take them by the hand, or if you're afraid that someone might be aggressive and reach out or hurt you, keep distance, keep some space between you, and try to get them to follow you to maybe a safe area, maybe more quiet area. And then if you need to step away, if the person is in a safe place, in a safe environment, sometimes it's okay. You need to make that decision in that moment. If the person is safe, you may need to step away and let them kind of de-escalate a little bit on their own. Step away, don't leave them, keep an eye from a distance on where they're at, but sometimes you need to step away because maybe you can cause them to get even more angry just by your presence. Okay, so those are some of the most common behaviors that I wanted to share with you. So let's do a little recap here. I know we've got just a few minutes left. Always, in our responses, you always want to reassure their safety. Okay, most of the times negative behaviors are out of fear and misunderstanding of things. So reassure, redirect, distract, divert, validate some of the feelings, even if someone is angry. Okay. Try to understand, even if you're angry, if someone validates you and acknowledges how you feel much better versus someone saying, well, why are you angry? You shouldn't be angry at that. And at times that might make you even more upset. So sometimes you just need to validate the emotion and validate the behavior, what's happening. Use eye contact and your calm voice tone. Okay. Remove from stressful situation, either the person or even yourself in some situations. Make sure that you're always using positive body language and gestures sometimes, and be aware of what you're doing, because sometimes we're not self-aware of what we're presenting and how we're presenting ourselves to the other person and how they may be interpreting that. Okay. Provide alternate activities whenever possible, provide rest periods, and encourage rest periods, even if they're not tired. And it's not typically, they may not seem tired, but perhaps if they did lie down, they would take a nap. Okay. Provide some quiet space, change the environment if necessary. Don't overreact. Don't scold. Don't argue. And most of all, be patient. Be patient. Patience is truly your superpower here. Be patient, try to figure this out. Where is the behavior coming from? And then coming up with a solution. Now, the progression of Alzheimer's disease, it does change cognition, functional ability, and behaviors may occur. Now, some of the other things, I did add this slide in here. Now, this is something that you may want to discuss with your physician, with the person's physician, on possible approved medications. Now, there are some medications that treat the symptoms. There are some that slow the progression of the cognitive functioning and behaviors. And then there are some that also treat the underlying symptoms, okay? And some that treat the underlying biology. Now, I am not a physician, so this is best discussed with your family doctor to see if there is any kind of regimen that your loved one, your person should be on, and that doctor would be able to recommend yes or no and what that might look like for them. But there are newer drugs that are on the market from 2020, 21, 23. So there are new emerging medications, which is a good thing. And typically you might see a combination of medications versus just one. Now, as the disease progresses, whether it's in the early stages, moderate stages, or late stages, we also want to, and always want to, encourage a healthy lifestyle for your loved one. Making sure that there's interaction, there's a healthy level of stimulation in the environment, some engagement, and addressing the person within. we know that the dementing illness is taking over the brain and there is some deterioration, evidenced by the behaviors and difficulty with communication and such, and overall decline in functioning. But the person still remains. We believe that the spirit of the person is still there. Spending quality time with them, having meals together, also providing just even a sense of purpose with them, with meaningful activities and engagement with family members, with friends, with music, singing, whatever that might look like. We do know from very early stages all the way to end stages that these elements in lifestyle are always important and very, very valuable. Thank you so much for your time, for participating in today's session. And hopefully, I think you might have some questions, so hopefully we'll answer some of those for you.
Joyce, once again, thank you so much for your organization and putting all of that together in a way that's more understandable for the rest of us. And folks, this isn't just information that Joyce learned, in studying. It's been years of hands-on practicality. So it is tried, true and tested. And Joyce, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. We do have a number of questions. So just in the absence of time, we're going to jump right in. Before we get started, I do see that our family advisor, Susan Berger, is on standby. If you have any questions in regard to Belmont Village directly, Susan has also a world of experience behind her. And if you wanted to call her directly, her number is 844-706-2273. Again, that is 844-706-2273. And Joyce, as usual, we have a number of questions here. So are you ready to get started with these?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Sure. Okay. And everyone, we cannot give specific advice. I will repeat this. We cannot give specific advice to your loved one's situation. Yeah, as Joyce mentioned, please see your family doctor or your neurologist, but we will do the best we can in answering these. So the first one, my wife is experiencing significant memory loss that has worsened recently, forgetting even events occurring in real time. Do you have any comments or suggestions how that should be dealt with?
Okay. Sometime in real time. So she's forgetting, am I interpreting that she's forgetting things like in the moment? Maybe in conversation. Okay. Okay. It could be that sometimes whatever's happening, if there's many people around, it could be that there's too much happening. There could be overstimulation. And sometimes as the dementia progresses, it becomes very difficult to track conversations. So in order to participate in conversations, you have to remember what was said at the beginning of the conversation in order to respond at the end of what someone says. So it could be pretty much overstimulating. It's kind of information overload. So my suggestion in similar situations like this is that okay, so really, the conversation, maybe if you're asking her a question, make it very simple, very direct question and statements. Not long conversations, not a lot of people coming at her. Very simple.
Thank you, Joyce. I have another question here. Can you apply the formula to boredom and how it manifests itself? So this was taken on early in your presentation. Can you apply the formula to boredom and how it manifests itself?
Oh, boredom. Okay, well, that is an excellent question. Okay, now there's a high correlation between boredom and apathy and dementia. Okay, now because the person may change in how they interact or how they engage in their life, apathy and boredom set in because they have the tendency to pull away because they can no longer do things the way they used to. So if there's a level of self-awareness, especially at the beginning stages, early dementia, they have the tendency to pull away. And so they have to self-isolate. So hence, here comes the boredom, here comes the apathy. And then the other level that is, the other piece that's correlated with this is also depression. So they're all interconnected. But boredom, you want to avoid boredom because lack of stimulation also can help, can cause escalation in the disease as well. I'm not sure if I answered that correctly, if that's the answer they were looking for.
Well, I think that you addressed their question. It was just kind of a vague question, but I think you probably hit it right on the head. And please feel free to say if it's something that you are not comfortable with addressing very specific scenarios, but I'm just going to read what we have here. My husband has been in memory care for a facility for 8 weeks. The problem is me. I am not living and sleeping with him 24/7. His behavior is extreme obsession and agitation with me, even when I visit, accusing me of having a boyfriend, and having grabbing me, etc. What is the solution? Do I not visit him? He is not adjusting. So again, it's been 8 weeks. He's been living in a memory care facility, and he's experiencing a lot of agitation towards his spouse.
Yeah. Okay. That is a very tough situation, and it's very emotionally driven. And sometimes it's harder on the healthy spouse, because you're kind of getting you're the punching bag, if you will, for lack of a better term. So excuse that term, but it is the dementia part. Some of the symptoms of dementia are a little paranoia, and obviously confusion, and having to adjust not being together. So he may be misinterpreting that, well, you're not with me, so who are you with? Okay. Now we know that interpretation is inaccurate. And now 8 weeks, he's been living in a community setting, but 8 weeks for him, we talk about acclimation and adjustment time. It may take longer, and that acclimation and adjustment is different for everyone. There are times, depending on the situation, so I don't want to make, any specifics here. So this is just a broad thought. Sometimes we will suggest to spouses or family members, stay away for a little bit. And I say that loosely. We can always communicate with you on a daily basis and let you know how they're doing. But sometimes it's a good thing for even your own mental health and well-being to kind of take a little bit of a breather, because the honest truth is that although he may be going through the dementia, the illness, you are still living your life, and you still need to be productive yourself and take care of yourself. So it's not selfish to not come every day. It's okay to take a break, give him time to acclimate and to adjust. And if the behavior is still there for, say another month or two, I would suggest contacting the physician. So, because sometimes there needs to be an adjustment with something that the physician can recommend, to help kind of navigate and smooth that transition a little bit. But that's a very difficult situation. But know that you're not doing anything wrong. It is the dementia that's causing him to behave that way.
Absolutely. And I think that you hit that so many times, how behavior is a means of communicating feelings and needs, and sometimes unmet needs. And as you mentioned so many times, it's an illness, and we have to practice our patience and reassurance.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing there is that he just doesn't understand why you're not there by his side like you always did. That's what he's remembering. You always were at my side. You were always with me, but now you're not. So again, doesn't understand it.
Yeah. And here at the community level, we find that as our residents become more engaged in other hobbies, and as they start to develop a lifestyle of their own, that they let go of some of these obsessive thoughts. So we hope that for you too.
Yes.
The next question. What might be possible causes of my father repeating the same story or statement over and over many times? And how should I react after feeling sick of hearing it 1,000 times?
It's not funny, but we experience this all the time. It's the same thing, repeat, repeat. When, you know, okay, you can change the subject. You can try to divert the attention and try to change the subject, but it may not stop them from repeating the same story over and over again. Now, a lot of times they become fixated on certain topics, certain stories, certain things, because perhaps it was a very pleasurable experience. And so, memory is based on emotion. And so I'm going to think that he's repeating it because it was a positive emotion and a positive experience, which is a good thing. But it just goes on repeat, repeat, repeat. And we kind of talked about that in the session. There's really not a lot you can do to stop the repetition, but again, provide a diversion to change the subject or take them elsewhere, kind of change the environment, because when you go in and out of a different environment, it kind of shifts the thinking a little bit, and you might notice that he might stop. Okay. So at best, you're going to look for minimizing the repetition. You may not make it go away. He's probably going to still say the same story, but maybe instead of, 8 or 10 times repeating the same story, maybe he'll repeat it 3 or 4.
Thank you, Joyce.
Mhm.
This one is specific. My mother is 77 years old, healthy, and in the late part of moderate stage Alzheimer's. Her most recent neuropsych eval stated that she is severely impaired and incapable of making new memories. She absolutely does not think there are any issues and refuses all help. She is still capable of living alone, but we think she needs to be in a memory care unit. How do you navigate that conversation? We are working on activating her power of attorney and getting guardianship, but I'm wondering if there are any communication tactics to help.
Okay, that's a tough one. Okay. So again, safety is going to trump everything. Safety is always going to be a priority. So if they're still living at home, they do need to be capable of keeping themselves safe at home. And again, maintaining the home, paying bills, all of these things, feeding themselves, cooking, bathing, grooming, everything. And the hard part is obviously, as you said, that they feel they are doing it well. So again, part of the dementia and the symptom is that there's no self-awareness that she is declining in those abilities. So there, once in a while, she's 77, you might have to kind of bring some things up and say, Mother, what about this? Show me how to do this. Okay. And I had a similar experience myself, okay, with my family member. And I said, okay, I believe you when you say you can do this, but show me, please show me you can do it. Okay. So sometimes you almost have to kind of demonstrate to them whether they can do it or not. Demonstrate it to me, Mom, show me you can. So you might have to kind of present some of those situations. And if she can't, she might start realizing, oh, I might need some help. And so you can just kind of chip away and start doing those types of things to try to convince her.
I agree with you, Joyce. Definitely start chipping away. And depending on how bad the memory loss is, if she doesn't remember the previous conversations, that can be challenging. But I always tell the folks that I work with daily is to, not convince them of a drastic move, but convince them of a next logical step, to do some research on in case something gets worse. Let's just go visit a couple of places just so that we have an idea of so that we have a plan B, so that we have an idea of what we need to do, if this illness should progress. And so if you can convince her to do that just one step at a time, that fear may may subside. Certainly communities like Belmont Village aren't, your typical regular homes. They're state-of-the-art facilities, just beautiful. And usually when people come here, it's just nothing like they thought it was going to be. Next question. Relative just moved into assisted living. She has moderate cognitive impairment and short-term memory loss. She sometimes forgets to take medications, especially under stress or fatigue. So again, she moved into assisted living. We arranged for someone to handle her meds and be there when she takes them. It's extremely upsetting to her as a loss of independence and control of her life. Crying, sobbing about the loss of her ability to be in control, which she maintains that she can. Any way to help her feel more comfortable with her sense of loss of control. So this appears to be a relative with moderate cognitive impairment living in assisted living and has short-term memory loss.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the medication, I mean, obviously that is important for obvious reasons that she takes her medication. So if someone is administering the medications, that's a good thing. Um, but we need to focus on what she can do. We have the tendency to focus on the disabilities and what we can no longer do or what we've lost versus the abilities that still remain. So focus on those. The tendency is to lose your confidence in your own self. And you have the tendency to also feel a bit diminished because you feel less capable, that, oh, if I can't do everything on my own like I used to, then I'm just not the same. Okay. So you want to focus on the abilities that still remain, identify and really kind of come up with a list. This is what you can still do. You can still do A, B, and C, and you can do it well. You're amazing. So promote the confidence to build the self-esteem, to know that she's still capable in so many ways. Well, yes. Well, yeah, maybe we do need some help with some things. Well, and you have to kind of promote that it's okay. It's okay. It's not right or wrong. It's neither one. It's just saying that, well, okay, fine. Someone's going to give me my medication. Well, that's all right. Okay, because I can still do all these other things very well on my own. So you want to identify where she's still doing very, very well and promote that.
Thank you, Joyce. Let me see here. Next one. This is kind of a good question here that I want to hear the response to myself. What I'm hearing is to reduce stimulation. I thought stimulation is good for dementia. So how does one balance the appropriate amount? So I know there's probably more appropriate stimulation. So how would you answer that?
I did say that a couple times, didn't I? Even in the session, sometimes it can be overstimulating. Again, it is really striking that balance, whether, it's for an individual or you're working with a group of people during activities, but having the appropriate level of stimulation on a consistent basis is important. So mind, body, spirit, you want to make sure that you target those areas, that you're doing different activities that are stimulating the mind, making you think and process information. So you keep those neuronal connections active and connecting. Okay. When I mention, overstimulation, it's almost to the point where, think of it in terms of, it's just too much where I can't tolerate it. So it's finding that just right balance and that just right challenge for each individual, cognitively and physically. So think of yourself going into a live concert and it's so loud to the point where, you kind of have to cover your ears because it's just too much. When you have dementia and you go into an environment that is interpreted as being overstimulating, it's to the point where they can't tolerate it. They can't process the environment. So it's striking that balance. Okay. So can they tolerate, understanding what they can tolerate? Can they tolerate small groups of people, larger groups of people? Or is it more one-on-one? What is the level of stimulation that they're requiring? And being able to really harness that. But stimulation, yes. To clarify, yes, you do need stimulation, both cognitively and physically, every single day. Yes, you do. You just want to strike that balance.
And folks, we have taken a lot of Joyce's time today, but we probably have just room for one more question, Joyce. And I think it's a good one that a lot of people face. I'll ask you the question first and we'll go into it. So my mother-in-law has moderate to severe Alzheimer's and is in memory care. She calls multiple times a day crying with similar reoccurring complaints. I'm locked. Why can't I live with my family? You've abandoned me. We try to offer reassurance, but we can't solve her problems because she must stay in memory care. She needs a secured environment. And to make matters worse, she forgets all about our conversation a minute later. And every time we get a call, it's very upsetting. Any tips for us? Now, before you answer, one thing I want to say that our families find very reassuring, and you may want to ask her memory care facility to do this, is to take photos of her in engagement. because oftentimes we see our residents having a great time, at the fashion show, or, at the sing-along, or learning about what happened on this day in history, or, we see our residents doing so much, but when their loved ones come or when they call, they don't remember any of that. And so the photos are often very helpful to provide reassurance to our families. How would you answer that, Joyce?
Yeah, I've experienced the same thing too. Sometimes what they tell the families are one thing, but then what's happening in the life of the community is completely different. As far as the phone calls, I do not recommend having cell phones all the time if they don't know how to manage the phone and then they're calling you around the clock. So you might kind of want to pull the reins in on that phone. Talk to the staff and find out what she's really engaging in, what's happening, because odds are that she's doing a lot more. She might be exhibiting a little resentment with the change of environment, with the change of style. And so the hope is that she's going to kind of get through that period eventually. But is that she's probably more engaged than what she's probably telling you.
I would say that that is often the case too. So ladies and gentlemen, that really concludes our presentation. We got to as many questions as we could in the order received. Please feel free to reach out to our family advisor if you had any specific questions about Belmont Village. Again, Susan's number is 844-706-2273. 844-706-2273. You will be receiving a recording of this webinar, and you may also access this webinar as well as Joyce's previous presentations and a world of other experts on a variety of topics that can be found at belmontvillage.com webinars. Okay, so we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. And Joyce, it's been an incredible series. I'm sure that many of us are going to watch these over and over again. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And thank you, Anne, behind the scenes. Everyone, we'll see you next time. Have a great day.